This is an archive video of our first Campus Voices conversation with Governor Tom Vilsack. To participate in the next event live, watch the homepage at campusvoices.org. Our guest this afternoon is Tom Vilsack. Governor Vilsack served as the governor of Iowa from 1998 to 2006, the first Democrat elected to the position in 32 years. As governor, he served as chair of the Democratic Governors Association, the Midwestern Governors Association, the Governors Ethanol Coalition, and the Governors Biotech Partnership. After keeping his commitment to serve only 2 terms, he ran as a candidate for the U.S. presidency before announcing his withdrawal from the race in February of 2007. After that, he served as a national co-chair of the Hillary Clinton for President campaign. He currently is an active surrogate for the Obama campaign and is at Harvard this semester as a fellow at the Institute of Politics, where he leads a weekly study group about risk and the top issues facing America. Our topic today is last night's vice presidential debate and the state of the campaign. To discuss that, we have Harvard students in the room with us, representing the college Democrats, the Republican Club, and other political groups on campus, as well as students across the country watching live at campusvoices.org and participating in the chat room. I'll be monitoring the chat room throughout and will be bringing in questions and opinions from there. To get us started, Governor Vilsack, who won last night's debate?
Well, I suppose it depends on what side of the aisle you sit on. I honestly thought that Senator Biden did a great job last night. He did a great job because he was able to distinguish the Obama-Biden platform from what McCain and Palin have proposed. I thought he did a very good job of providing a contrast, suggesting that the McCain-Palin ticket would basically continue the efforts of the Bush administration, that Obama and Biden would move it in a different direction. I thought Governor Palin did a very good job stylistically. She was obviously well prepared with talking points that she had practiced, and I thought she came across very confident.
All right, let's open it up to the floor here. Does anyone have a question for Governor Vilsack about the debate? Jonathan?
I'm Jonathan Hawley. I'm from Oceanside, California, and I'm with the Harvard College Democrats. Governor Vilsack, traditionally in recent campaigns, modern campaigns, the role of the vice president during the campaign itself is that of a attack dog. The person who's able to enthusiastically go after their opponent's record while endorsing their own candidates' positions. I'm curious, in last night's debate, which of the candidates do you think performed this attack dog role the best?
Actually, I think last night's debate was a bit more subtle than previous debates. I thought that both Senator Biden and Governor Palin did a pretty good job of what they were asked to do by the campaign. It was fairly clear that Governor Palin was asked to basically project herself as a person who was competent, someone who would be capable of assuming the responsibilities of the presidency should something happen to Senator McCain if he were elected president. Senator Biden's mission was a little different. His mission was to avoid a direct debate with Governor Palin. It was a very tricky political situation for him. He was, I think, asked to focus on the contrast between the visions for America. And I think he did a very good job of focusing on the fact that Senator Obama and Senator Biden would be focused on growing the middle class, expanding the middle class in this country. And they contrasted that with what has happened during the Bush administration and a continuation of what they believed, that they argued that would be a continuation if Senator McCain were elected president. So I thought they both did a pretty good job. It was not quite as confrontational, not quite as aggressive as I think some people had expected the debate to be, which was, I think, a good thing.
So let's talk about that aggressiveness. I thought it was clear, as you said, that Senator Biden was trying not to attack. Do you think that hurt him, or how do you think that affected the outcome?
I think Senator Biden at the beginning of the debate was, it took a little while for him to get settled, which is often the case. A lot of people who have not been through that process before, it might be helpful for the students to understand that just before the debate begins, essentially everybody that's connected to the campaign leaves you alone. And you are in a room by yourself with your thoughts and with the nervous energy that is created under the circumstances. And so when people go on to the debate floor, they are very tense, they're very nervous, and in Joe Biden's case, I think that reflected itself early in the debate. There was another aspect of Senator Biden's presentation last night, which I don't think very many people really thought much about, but today he's sending his oldest son, off to the war in Iraq. And so I'm sure that that was weighing heavily on his mind at the same time he was debating. So under the circumstances, I thought he performed very well. And again, I think Governor Palin was very well prepared. She came across as sort of a regular person, which I think was part of the strategy to try to appeal to folks in the middle. I think the viewers of the debate, I believe, gave the debate to Senator Biden in most of the polls because he was, I think, a bit more substantive in his responses, a bit more comprehensive in his responses. I think the most telling part of the debate, for me, was the conversation they had about what they would do if something happened to President Obama or President McCain. I think Senator Biden, that was one of his best answers. He clearly indicated a desire to carry out the Obama agenda, which, if you watch the monitor of people's reaction, was favorably received by people watching. I think Governor Palin essentially suggested that she might go in a different direction than Senator McCain, which I found surprising. I thought that was an interesting response from her, but very consistent with the way in which she's approached this election.
We have a question here from the chat room about style of the candidates, saying, do you believe that Governor Palin's more folksy stylings, is the wording there, winks, smiles, and things like that affected her credibility or how she appeared to the American people?
Well, I think it's important when you look at style, you have to ask yourself who it is that Governor Palin was actually speaking to. In a debate, while it is to the entire nation and it's being watched by millions of people, most often you've been briefed on precisely what group you have to convince. And I think Governor Palin's mission was to focus on folks in the middle. Folks in lower income, working families, folks in perhaps living in the heartland. She mentioned that specifically during the debate. I think her message was tailored for that group of people. And I think that they were probably very comfortable with her style. Again, I think it's more than style, though. I think most Americans are looking for something beyond that. They obviously want to feel comfortable with the person, but they also want to know the person has a broad, comprehensive understanding of the very complex issues that this country faces. And on that score, I think Senator Biden did well.
And another question from the room here.
I have one. On that note, so do you think that Senator Biden's general topics about, raising his children and working through the middle class, how would that affect the middle class voters of America who are perhaps deciding, do you think they'd be comfortable with him?
Well, that's a very good question. Stephanie, I think it's important for you to focus on precisely who Joe Biden was speaking to when he answered that question. One of the great demographics that we've seen in recent elections is the number of women who are voting. And clearly that is an important group of people in this particular election because there is a woman on the ticket who has a legitimate shot of getting elected. And so it's incumbent on the Democrats, who have two men on the ticket, to basically convey a message to the women of America that they fully appreciate and understand their thought process, the sacrifices that they make, the decisions that they make in their own personal life as it relates to family, community, and the country. Joe Biden is uniquely qualified, I think, under the circumstances of his personal life to answer those questions because of the fact that he lost his wife, his first wife, very early in their marriage, and tragically lost his daughter, and saw his two sons seriously hurt in a car accident. By virtue of that experience and by virtue of being a single parent for an extended period of time, I think Joe Biden could connect to many women who are faced with that same kind of challenge. And I think it was probably comforting to them to know he knows exactly what it's like to juggle work and be a single parent and be there for your children and make sure that they're properly dressed and make sure that their lunches are packed and make sure they get to school on time and make sure they get to the Cub Scout meeting and the ball game and church and all of the challenges of raising children. So I think that was a very good moment for him. And at the end of the debate, he obviously got very emotional about it. And I think that was probably okay. I think that's probably okay. I think we've sort of grown as a country to get away from the notion that men have to be a certain way and women have to be a certain way. And we saw a different style last night. We saw the woman candidate at times being more aggressive and the male candidate at times being on the little softer side.
On that note, I have a kind of follow-up question. I'm Jared Safran from Northern New Jersey. I'm the head of the College Democrats here at Harvard. It's one thing, we hear authenticity as a buzzword all the time, and it's one thing when Joe Biden offers up a personal story, but it's another thing when you hear constantly phrases like Main Streeters like me, or Todd and I are just regular folks, or Biden referring to Scranton like 50 times every debate. And I wonder, at what point does this metaphor and does this analogy of Wall Street and Main Street, of regular folks and the kind of East Coast elite, ostensibly of which this institution is a part, when does that lose its authenticity, and when do voters start saying, like, stop referring to yourself as a regular folk, you're the governor of a state?
Right. That's a great question, and I think it is conveyed in so many different ways. It isn't just the language you use. It's the body language that you have when you are speaking that language. It is the tone of voice that you use. It is the context in which you use it. There were times during the debate where perhaps on both sides that metaphor was a bit forced. Having said that, it is a rule in politics that if you really want to make a difference and you want to make an impression, you have to be repetitive. You have to repeat something over and over and over again so that it actually sinks into enough people. You're talking to potentially 100 million people that are going to vote in this election. And you're talking to them not just on the television, but you're also talking through the print media, through the internet, through blogs, where people may not necessarily see how you've responded, may not see the repetition of Scranton or Main Streeter, but might read one quote with that in it. So you have to kind of balance that. And it's a difficult balance, but when you're watching on TV, there are times when it's sort of like the fingernails on the chalkboard, you know, it's like, okay, enough already. Again, it's a hard circumstance because you're in that debate and you first of all, you're nervous, and then you kind of get into the moment, and sometimes it's hard to remember what you said 2 questions ago, much less how many times you've used the term Main Street or Scranton. See? Again, I think they both did a pretty good job last night under the circumstances.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Steph Blue from Houston, Texas. And I was just wondering, although I admire Joe Biden's passion and his love for his son, when he showed his emotion last night, why does the media, why does everyone see Joe Biden as a sensitive person, whereas if Sarah Palin were to have done the same thing and get emotional, maybe teared up, she would have been viewed as a person that didn't have the capacity, that didn't have the judgment, didn't have the willpower to lead a nation, whereas when Joe Biden does it, he gets lauded for all of his sensitivity, whereas if Sarah Palin did it, just like Hillary Clinton, the mainstream media showed clip after clip of her tearing up at that New Hampshire meeting, and then why is there a disparity between that and Sarah Palin if she had done the same thing?
You know, I don't necessarily agree with the premise of the question, Tucker. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think that may have been the way it used to be, but I think actually Hillary Clinton's incident in New Hampshire, when she won the New Hampshire primary, and many people attributed the win in part to the fact that she showed emotion, that she showed passion and caring. I think that sort of dissipated that whole notion that it wasn't okay for a woman to show emotion and that it was okay for a man, that there was going to be a double standard. So I don't know if Sarah Palin had teared up when she talked about her child with Down syndrome. I think everyone would have understood that. I certainly would have understood it, and I don't think she would have been penalized for it. I think where Sarah Palin's challenge is relative to the mainline media is whether or not she's got the breadth of experience and knowledge that conveys a sense that no matter what the circumstance might be that she would be confronted with as president, she's capable of handling it. I think that was a challenge, and I'm not sure during that debate she was given a real opportunity to show that. What she showed was that she understood what her message was and what her mission was, and she did it pretty well. But I'm not sure that it was enough to convince people to vote for John McCain, which at the end of the day is really ultimately what it's all about. They're not necessarily voting for Sarah Palin, they're voting for John McCain. It's the top of the ticket people vote for.
And I want to bring in a question from the chat room now. We have people who like to speak here as well. Talking about one of the points during the debate where they actually the candidates tended to agree with each other. It seems as though Senator Biden and Governor Palin agreed on a lot of issues, such as the definition of marriage. Do you think this made a big impact, that sort of contrary to the general perception of a debate, that they agreed rather than fighting on that?
Well, I think most Americans appreciate the fact when candidates are candid and basically say that the other side's made a good point or that there's agreement. I think many of us want our politicians to find common ground and consensus. On that particular issue, I think it's going to be very interesting to look at the transcript of the debate, because I listened to that answer very carefully from both Senator Biden and Governor Palin. And I think what Governor Palin said might have been somewhat inconsistent. On the one hand, she indicated a desire to be tolerant, a desire to understand and appreciate that we should accept the decisions that adults make. On the other hand, I think she was a bit hesitant about the notion of precisely what kind of rights a committed gay couple would have. Joe Biden was unequivocal. He clearly indicated it was his belief and intent that a gay couple would be allowed to have the same rights as a heterosexual couple, committed couple, in terms of insurance, in terms of the ability to visit people in the hospital to make life and death decisions. So, I think the transcript, I think what happens in a debate is you get your first reaction when you watch the debate, and then the transcript is reviewed, and then over the course of the next couple of days, items out of the debate become stories in and of themselves. This might be a story, potentially, although the bailout that's taking place, which passed the House just a few minutes ago, is probably going to be the lead story tonight, and it's probably going to take the vice presidential debate off of the front page and put it on the back page, and then it becomes the weekend, and then we start focusing on the next presidential debate.
I also wanted to respond to that for a second. My name is Dylan Matthews. I'm from Hanover, New Hampshire. And I also listened carefully to that question, and I feel like it didn't do justice to either of their records on that issue. And maybe that's just the specific question that was asked, but I think it's fair to say that the Obama-Biden ticket is the most pro-gay, pro-equality ticket in the history of the Democratic Party, that they support full repeal of the Defense of Marriage Act, which is something that Hillary Clinton and John Edwards didn't do in the primaries. They support repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. They support federal recognition of civil unions and marriages. Whereas Sarah Palin has affiliations with the ex-gay movement, which is a bunch of quacks who think that you can convert gays. She tried to get Children's Book Daddy's Roommate removed from a local library in Wasilla, and John McCain has consistently been against recognition of gay relationships and repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So I think maybe it was just the phrasing of the question, but it didn't show the grave disparity between the Obama-Biden ticket stance for equality and the McCain-Palin's ticket belief in continuing discrimination based on sexual orientation.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Just one of the things about debates is that oftentimes, Dylan, you answer the question you want to answer, not necessarily the question that's asked. And that we saw many circumstances of that last night.
I'm sorry. Just speaking on that, I believe that Sarah Palin was unequivocal in her support of the rights that she would extend to gay couples. The only thing that Senator Biden did differently from Sarah Palin in that debate was say that he would give them official federal recognition. But they both did say that neither one of the campaigns would officially recognize gay marriage, didn't they?
There's no question they were very consistent on that latter part, but I'm not necessarily one to concede that they were so consistent on the first part of your comment. I think she said at the beginning of her answer, I think she conveyed a different direction in terms of her attitude about the rights of people in gay couples, and then she sort of transitioned into a broader, more tolerant, more accepting statement. And I think the unfortunate part of these debates is that there isn't really the opportunity to follow up, which was to Dylan's point. If there had been follow-up, then obviously the moderator could say, well, wait a second, what about this? What about this aspect of your record, or what about this decision you made as a mayor, or this decision you made as a governor, or this proposal that you signed on to as a legislator? There wasn't that much of a follow-up. And that's part of the problem with this debate structure. I'm wondering whether it would be better off for Americans if you took the moderator out of the equation and you just simply had the two folks at a table and they just began a conversation about the country. And they could, if the two of us were doing this, I could say, Duck, what do you think about gay marriage? And you could expound on it, and then you could come back to me and say, well, what do you think about gun rights? And I could expound, and you could say, well, wait a second, I thought your record was so. I think it would be kind of an interesting experience for all of us, and we might actually learn more than we learned from what is oftentimes extremely scripted, and we saw that last night. I mean, many of the answers were canned, many of the answers were prepared and practiced on both sides. They spent hours and hours and hours preparing for that debate. And you really have to study the transcript, and you have to look at the answers to the questions in order to really determine what was the nut of this debate. Another critical moment, I think, was when they talked about the role of the vice president. I think Joe Biden was very specific about that. I think Senator Palin also was very specific in that she felt that the role of the vice president needed to be expanded, consistent with what Vice President Cheney has espoused. And that is a fundamental difference between the two camps. And it's a significant difference, a very significant difference in terms of whether the vice president is part of the legislative branch or part of the executive branch, and whether you can conveniently use one against the other when requests are made for information, for example, as Vice President Cheney made. So I think there are a lot of nuggets in there, but I think you have to dig pretty hard for them because it's so scripted.
Hey, Governor Vilsack, I'm Carl Hurt, and I'm a member of the Harvard Republican Club, and I actually would like to return to one of the issues that was discussed earlier, which is the experience issue. And my question is essentially a simple one, which is, why have the Obama campaign, the Democratic Party, and the media been so concerned about Palin's experience when she has more executive experience than Obama and has been in public life for just as much time, if not more time than Obama? And how does Obama's experience qualify him to be president more so than Palin's experience qualify her to be vice president?
Well, they obviously have different experience levels, but let's take Senator Obama's experience first. Senator Obama has experience, obviously, as a state senator and as a United States senator. And so in that capacity, he has been required to think about, to formulate, to vote on, and to decide a wide range of issues, both foreign and domestic. When you're a governor, you are focused predominantly, 95% of your time, on domestic issues. You're focused on health care for your citizens, you're focused on education of your children, you're focused on jobs. You aren't focused on the relationship that your country has with dictators, or your relationship your country has with entities like NATO or the United Nations. That's not part of your job. So they have different levels of experience. I think the question about Governor Palin is that she has been a governor for such a short period of time that she hasn't really had an opportunity to have a full range of experiences in dealing with crisis, in dealing with financial difficulties, in dealing with natural disasters, in dealing with a whole series of things that could better prepare her to assume the awesome responsibility of being President of the United States. And I think her inexperience, if you will, in dealing with foreign leaders was certainly a discussion point before the debate. I know I traveled as governor to 26 different countries. And I think that travel really did fundamentally make me a better governor, and certainly made me a more plausible candidate for president, because I could say I've been to Iraq, I have been to Baghdad, I have talked to Iraqi leaders, I've been to Afghanistan, I've talked to President Karzai, I've visited the soldiers, I've been in the battle zone, I've been to China, I've been to Korea, I've been to Japan, I mean, I've been to all over the world, and visiting these leaders and getting a better understanding of the relationship between the country and the United States and my state. So I think it's a legitimate question that's been raised. And the other experience that Senator Obama has had, that Governor Palin has not had until the last 3 or 4 weeks, is he has been engaged in a presidential campaign. He has been in charge of an operation that has employed thousands of people and has generated $300–400 million. He has been, in essence, the CEO of his campaign. And to a certain extent, in that capacity, you see his leadership style. You can determine the kind of people he surrounds himself with, which is an indication of what kind of president he likely would be. She has not had that experience until recently, and that's an amazing experience to run for president. I mean, you travel all over the country, you see and understand how different parts of the country are, and in many cases how much the same they are. So different experiences. I think it's a legitimate point, but I think Senator McCain, frankly, made it more difficult to make the case about experience, which he could have made an interesting contrast between his experience as a longtime member of Congress in the Senate and Senator Obama. There could have been easily made that case. More difficult to make it when you make the selection of Sarah Palin. Sort of took the experience thing off the table, and now it's a debate about change. That's a tough debate. It's a very tough debate for Republicans because they're in power now in the White House. If the Democrats were in power, it would be a much harder debate for Senator Biden and Senator Obama. But because Republicans are in the White House, to suggest that somehow you would be different than one of your fellow Republicans, that's a little harder sell, I think.
I know we have a lot. Right. I know we have a lot of excitement here. We also want to make sure we get some people in the chat room going talking. There's a discussion going on right now about the excitement level about the vice presidential debate compared to a lot of the rest of the campaign and compared to last week's presidential debate. A lot of people are saying that they saw a much higher turnout from people watching this debate, many more people talking about it. Why was that? Where do we go from here, though, now that the debate's over? What's the role of the vice presidential candidates for the rest of the election?
Well, one of the reasons why there may have been a higher viewership was that the vice presidential debate was on Thursday, and the presidential debate was on Friday. And there are an awful lot of things going on Friday evenings around the country during the fall. I think the vice presidential candidates go back on the trail. I think both of them go back with a bit of renewed confidence because they have weathered this very traumatic, pressurized situation and gotten good reviews. And so I think they both are confident when they go back on the trail. I think they'll continue to essentially convey the same messages on the trail that they messaged during the debate. Senator Biden is going to continue to talk about Senator McCain, and can he make the case that he's in fact a change agent when he's agreed with George Bush 90% of the time? Governor Palin's going to make the case that they are the reformers, they're the ones who are actually going to bring fundamental change to Washington, and they're prepared to lead. And I think you're just going to see an aggressive effort by both of these campaigns. I think it's going to be very interesting over the course of the next several weeks as the campaigns begin to make decisions about the allocation of resources. A decision was just made by the McCain campaign to essentially leave Michigan, which I was very surprised when they made that decision. And I suspect it's because of the fact that Senator McCain has taken federal financing, which limits the amount of money that his campaign has. Senator Obama did not make that decision, and there's a question and issue about that. But as a result of that, he is in a position to be able to provide financial resources in many different states. So he has, as a Democratic candidate, broadened the map. Senator McCain is now focusing the map. And I think what you're going to see is repeat visits to these key battleground states, and that number of key battleground states is going to be smaller and smaller and smaller as time goes on.
Let's talk about some of those battleground states. With Michigan now, the McCain campaign saying that's out of play. What do you think are the say top three battlegrounds this election?
I think it's different for each campaign. I think Senator McCain obviously would like to be able to change the Kerry-Gore map, if you will, by taking Pennsylvania away, perhaps by taking Wisconsin or Minnesota away from the Obama campaign. On the other hand, I think Senator Obama is anxious to put Ohio back in play, Florida back in play, Virginia back in play, and maybe even North Carolina. So I think you're going to see a lot of activity in those states. You're going to see some activity in the southwestern part of the country, where Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico, thank you, are sort of up for grabs. Any combination of those states will give either one of those two camps a victory. So I think you're going to see a lot of activity in those three areas of the country: the Southwest, the Upper Midwest, and the Mid-Atlantic states.
Beyond key swing states, we have a question in the chat room here about the other states. I'm curious the effect of having offices in small red states like South Dakota with so few weeks left until the election. How do you think that, in terms of distributing resources, works to either camp's advantage?
Well, sometimes you start off thinking you got a shot at a state and you end up not having a shot, but many candidates down ballot are now relying on the resources you can put into the state. And one of the criticisms of John Kerry's campaign was that he took all of his resources out of Missouri early in the 2004 campaign, which made it very difficult for some of the senatorial, congressional, gubernatorial candidates in Missouri to win. And so I think the Obama campaign, which is very concerned about having a broad campaign, consistent with Howard Dean's 50-state strategy, I believe that they're trying to live up to that by maintaining offices, which they can afford to maintain because they have the resources. They may not win South Dakota, but they may help Stephanie Herseth win her congressional seat again, or they may help legislative candidates win that might otherwise not win. You also have South Dakota being a border state bordering on Iowa, so you might be able to reinforce your Iowa message by advertising in South Dakota, and it carries over and spills over into Iowa. So there may be a lot of consequences and benefits to this that you might not think at first.
We are running out of time. I want to take 2 more questions from the floor before we finish up.
Governor. Clay Miller, Virginia, Republican. So Joe Biden was Senator Biden is clarifying his response of no coal in America with discussion of clean coal plants. So kind of a 2-part question. What is Senator Biden's definition of a clean coal plant, and how many of these plants are currently functioning in the United States?
I think what Senator Biden is talking about, I don't know this for certain, but I think what he's referring to is the research that's ongoing today to try to figure out how you would capture carbon produced by a coal plant and sequester it or store it for an extended period of time, thereby not contributing it to the atmosphere. Bits and pieces of that concept, of that technology exist, but the entire package does not exist. And indeed, there's an effort in the United States it was an effort in the United States in the Bush administration to develop a demonstration project of that, which they basically abandoned. So I think the answer to your question is I'm not sure that there is, quote, a plant today that is capable of capturing the carbon and sequestering it. But in order to deal with greenhouse gases, in order to reduce the greenhouse gases at the level that would be required, you're going to have to figure that out. And so research dollars have to go into it. I think that's why Senator Obama and Senator Biden have been so insistent on the $150 billion that they want to put into research and development. So I think that's kind of where it is.
And with the last question again.
Palin was brought in to rally a lot of the groups, including women and evangelicals, in the McCain camp. And after the previous media interviews and the debate, where do you feel those groups now stand in relation to Ms. Palin, and how do you think those groups, especially women, are going to be voting in November based on her performance over the last few weeks?
Well, I think that Governor Palin did a good job of reinforcing the conservative base in the Republican Party, which was a reason for her selection. I think it's fairly clear that Senator McCain perhaps wanted someone other than Governor Palin initially, but realized that a selection of a Joe Lieberman or Tom Ridge would make it difficult to keep the conservative base in line. So his selection of Governor Palin basically was designed to do that, and I think she reinforced that opportunity last night. I think the challenge is whether or not that base is large enough, and whether it's capable of expanding enough to win in the states that have to be won in order for a Republican ticket to win in this current election. Historically, it has been wide enough, but I think you see a lot of dissatisfaction with the direction of the country under the Bush administration. And again, it gets back to the issue of whether or not McCain and Palin can distinguish themselves enough from Bush-Cheney, or whether Obama and Biden can link them together in the minds of voters. I think Senator McCain has been hurt the last 10 days because of the way in which he's responded to the economic and credit crisis. I think he has reinforced the notion that what he stands for is not too dissimilar from what George Bush has advocated, which is deregulation of industries and more tax cuts, particularly for large businesses and for people who are doing quite well in the economy. That may not be the message that sells in America today. And it's not a question of whether it's the right policy or the wrong policy, it's just a question, does it sell today? And I think Senator McCain's having a hard time selling it, which is why you're seeing the polls begin to create enough of a gap that it's noticeable.
And we are going to have to end there. I know we had some questions both here in person and in the chat room that we didn't get to, and I'm sorry about that. But thank you so much to Governor Vilsack and to all the people who participated here and online for joining us for this event. Thank you.